welcome to this interpretation test. In this presentation, I am a professor of economics, and I'm addressing a group of student journalists, and I'm going to be telling them about something called transfer pricing. Transfer pricing refers to the fact that very often multinational companies, or multinational groups rather, have various companies that may do business with each other, and when they sell a product to each other, that is called a transfer. And there are many things that, many implications based on the price that is allocated to that transfer, for instance, of a part by one company to another company that is then going to make a product out of that. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about why it's important, and we're going to talk in particular about one principle which is called the arm's length principle, which I'll describe a little bit in my presentation. Okay, so I'm going to start in just a second. I hope you're ready. So dear students, good afternoon. And today I'd like to discuss with you one of the most important economic concepts that you may never have heard of. And that concept is called transfer pricing. Now, the tremendous importance of this concept results from how, in a certain way, transfer pricing describes no less than 60% of global trade. However, in order to explain this, I think it's better to rely on a situation that we can all more easily relate to. Take the sale of a house. Now obviously, if you're selling a house, the situation is not exactly the same if the transaction takes place between two strangers, or if it's between, for example, parents and their grown-up child. For a number of reasons, if parents are selling a house to their child, maybe they'll want to sell it at a price which is actually under market value, which is below market value. They would want to do this in order to help out their child in a way. And that's all fine and well, of course, from a family perspective. You'd almost expect that. But at the same time, the sale price, which is registered, the official sale price when the parents sell their house to their child, well, that might have an impact on other things. For example, taxes. The taxes that the child will have to pay, the taxes that the parents will have to pay. So bear this in mind. Bear this in mind, the idea that the price of the sale of a house between two people who are not strangers may actually be something which is important. Bear this in mind, but now I'd like you to consider something quite different, which is the situation of a large company, or rather a large group of companies that would have activities in many countries, many different countries. Now obviously, the various companies of this group will often do business together. For example, one of the group's companies, which is located in one country, may be one of these suppliers, or maybe even the sole supplier for another one of the group's companies, and that second company would be located in a different country. The parts of a product, for instance, the parts of a computer are manufactured in one country, but then are assembled in another country. And then once the computer's assembled, once we have a finished product, that product may be sent to a distributor, which would also be a subsidiary of the same group. It would be sent to this distributor in order to be sold in a third country. So in this case, we have just one finished product, which is entirely produced by a single group. However, in the process of producing the computer, there have been multiple transfers from one company to another. Transfers of parts from the manufacturer to the assembler, or of the finished product from the assembler to the distributor. These are just two examples. You can probably imagine that in real life, there are many more situations of this type that may come up. Now, for tax purposes, the issue of pricing these transfers, what we call transfer pricing, becomes central. Because when you think of it, it's easy to determine the group's overall profit for the sale of this computer. That would be the retail price of the computer minus total expenses. What's trickier, however, is to determine how to allocate, how to break down this profit amongst the various companies that participated in making and selling the computer. Now, if you look at it from the perspective of the group of companies, the multinational corporation, the obvious temptation is to allocate as much of the profit as possible to a company that is located in a country where profits are taxed the least. Now, that's understandable from the perspective of the corporation. From the perspective of the various states that are collecting these taxes, well, the perspective is quite different, and that's why you need to have, in today's economy, today's globalized economy, you need to have a sound set of rules for transfer pricing. Now, how important is it? Well, to put it bluntly, it's extremely important. As I alluded to at the beginning of my little presentation here today, in fact, nowadays, over 60% of global trade takes place within multinational enterprises. Now, this is due to two related trends, namely globalization on the one hand and the rise of the multinational corporation on the other. And this also explains why transfer pricing, which used to be a subject that was of interest only to tax administrators, is now something which is getting attention from politicians, economists, and NGOs, non-governmental organizations. So, as I said, having a sound set of rules for transfer pricing is crucial. Now, in order to do this, by and large, the current system relies on something called the arm's length principle. Now, this idea, which was actually developed at the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and it's actually an idea which is now part of a number of bilateral tax treaties. This idea is that a transfer price should be the same as if the two companies involved were independent rather than part of the same corporate structure. So basically, that's the criterion that's used to determine if a transfer price is fair. And if a transfer price is fair, then the allocation of profit amongst the various companies of the same group should also be fair. That would be the consequence, if you will. Now, in practice, the application of such a principle is incredibly complex. If we go back to the first example I started off with of parents selling a house to their child, in that situation, it's relatively easy to get a real estate agent or some kind of certified expert to come in and assess the market value of the house and determine whether the sale was a legitimate one or not. Now, when you start talking about the fair price, for instance, of intellectual property that's being licensed from one company to another, well, things are not so easy. So, in fact, when it comes to the issue, the more general issue of taxing multinational companies, even though it is an extremely important issue, there are no easy or straightforward solutions. However, I think that people are picking up on how significant this issue is. In fact, no later than a couple of days ago, Starbucks UK, the British branch of the well-known coffee shop chain, volunteered to pay £20 million over the next 2 years in corporate taxes. Now, they volunteered to do this as a result of a campaign of public outrage over the fact that the company, which is extremely popular in the UK, had not paid any corporate taxes there. And the way Starbucks UK up until now had managed to avoid paying corporate taxes in the UK was by allocating a large part of its profits to a Luxembourg-based subsidiary. And of course, taxes in Luxembourg are much lower. So this was an example of how transfer pricing is extremely important nowadays. I hope you'll bear this in mind in your future work. And with that, I wish you very good luck. Take care.